I never thought that overhearing my son's poker night would end up exposing a lifetime of betrayal and a truth I didn't want to believe. He was in the den, 3 bourbons deep, bragging over cards. She never suspected a thing. Hell, she's not even my real mom, he laughed. I stood 10 feet away, halfway down the hall, holding a load of towels I'd just folded, my knees buckling as the words tore through the quiet. I started skimming her retirement when she got that bronchitis thing. Remember? Had her sign those papers. Clean as hell. My heart didn't break. It stopped. The load of towels dropped at my feet, and I grabbed the wall to stay upright. Every syllable sharpened a truth I hadn't dared name. My son, Brad, had stolen from me. Not in some dramatic movie way, but slow, systematic, precise. I backed away before I could hear more. If I'd stayed, I would have gone in swinging. But this wasn't a night for screaming. It was a night for remembering. For gathering everything I'd ignored. That damn routine paperwork he gave me when I was sick. Said it was just to update contacts with the bank and insurance. I was doped up on Mucinex and Advil. Wheezing, barely alert, trusting him like always. Of course I signed. I trusted him with more than that. Every bill I'd let him pay, every login I'd handed over. That wasn't care, it was access. He'd called me Ma, with that same smile as he took my keys, just to run an errand, then kept them. Told neighbors he was managing things while she recovered. He'd even changed the mailing address on my bank statements. I thought it was just a delay with the post office. Now I knew better. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until the first bird called, listing every account I had, everything Brad had touched. My hands trembled, but I pulled out the accordion folder from the bottom drawer. If he wanted to rob me blind, he should have destroyed that too. It held 20 years of bank statements, tax returns, and one thing he never knew existed, my handwritten list of all original account numbers. He might have treated me like a fool, but I wasn't dead yet. 3 weeks earlier, I'd signed a few routine papers Brad handed me while I was recovering from bronchitis in my Tucson living room, not knowing that signature would unlock a vault of lies and expose the life I thought I'd built with my only child. I'd been curled up in the recliner, half asleep under 2 blankets, the cough syrup dragging my eyelids down. Brad had breezed in like he always did, calling me Ma, setting a cup of tea down next to me like he was doing me a favor. Just some stuff for the bank and Medicare. They're updating policies. Sign here and here, he said, already clicking the pen and laying the pages on a clipboard. I signed without reading because I trusted him. I raised him to be decent. That trust took 30 years to build and 3 minutes to betray. Afterward, he tucked the papers back in his messenger bag, kissed my forehead like I was some feeble old lady, and told me not to worry about anything. I remember noticing he smelled like aftershave I didn't recognize. Something sharp, not cheap. He left whistling. I didn't think about it again until the night I heard him bragging. Then I replayed everything. The sudden appearance of that new financial planner I never met. The way my debit card expired and he offered to take care of the renewal. My gut had nudged me back then, but I'd hushed it, told myself he was helping because he cared. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who suspects her son of lying. I wanted to believe I was safe in my own home, with my own blood. Now I knew I'd handed him the keys. Those papers weren't for Medicare, they were for my IRA, my savings, my insurance, God knows what else. My own signature had unlatched the door, and he'd walked right through with both arms open, smiling like the thief he was. I opened the accordion folder again and started cross-checking. First task, find the date of that signature. If I could prove I was incapacitated, even just temporarily, that might count. The bank's cutoff for claims was 90 days. I had 22 left. Looking back, the red flags were always there. Missing deposits, passwords suddenly reset, and a new financial planner I'd never spoken to until that poker night crack confirmed the worst. Brad wasn't just taking money, he was keeping secrets about who he really was. It started subtle. My quarterly retirement payout didn't show in December, and Brad shrugged, said it was holiday bank traffic. Then my online account login stopped working. He offered to fix it, and within a day, access was restored. But I never got the password back. Too many login attempts, he said. Let me just manage it from here. I let him. I thought it was convenience. I called it love. He'd started using phrases that didn't sound like him. Terms like portfolio diversification and strategic withdrawal. Brad had never cared about money. In his 20s, he couldn't hold a job for more than a year. Always said he, quote, wasn't built for cubicles. Now he was talking about offshore markets and tax shelters. I thought maybe he'd matured. Maybe losing his dad changed something in him. I clung to that idea. It let me sleep. Then there was the day I got a voicemail from a woman named Deborah, asking if I had any questions before our scheduled meeting. I called back confused. She was part of a firm I'd never hired. Mr. Larkin made the appointment on your behalf, she said, polite but firm. I hung up, heart racing. Brad told me not to worry. Just an old lead, probably from that seminar we did years ago. I hadn't been to a seminar in over a decade. I pushed all of it down, gave him the benefit of the doubt. That poker night blew it all open. His voice didn't just sound smug, it sounded free. Like someone who'd pulled off the perfect trick and finally stopped pretending. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. He'd constructed an entire second identity on my dime, used my illness as cover, and sealed it with a forged paper trail. I logged on to the new secure email Lydia had helped me set up. I drafted a request to Desert First Trust for full account access logs and IP address history from the last 12 months, time to see who'd been logging in, and from where. I drove straight to my longtime bank branch the next morning, shaking but determined, and discovered my IRA had been drained over 18 months, $127,000 gone, with wire transfers I'd never authorized and an account contact change made by my son 2 months ago. The branch manager, a stiff man named Carver with a gold watch and no warmth, didn't meet my eyes at first. He read from the screen like a script. You've been making monthly withdrawals to an external account ending in 9,831. I told him I hadn't withdrawn a dime. He hesitated, then clicked something. Looks like your power of attorney initiated the transfers. Authorization on file. He turned the monitor so I could see. My name typed neatly beside a scrawled digital signature I didn't recognize. I asked for the transaction history. He printed it on thick paper, stapled into a packet too heavy for how little it offered. Dates, amounts, and the same withdrawal note each time. Reallocation per POA. 22 transfers. 4 states. 1 shell account. I flipped to the last page, pressed my thumb against the balance line, and stared at the number. $42. Carver cleared his throat. The account contact was updated to A. Bradley Larkin in September. He pronounced it like it meant nothing. To me, it was a nail in the coffin. I told him that wasn't authorized. He asked if I had legal counsel. I said yes. He handed me a customer dispute form, his fingers careful not to touch mine. Back in the car, I sat for a long time with the engine off. Sunlight poured through the windshield, hot and blinding. But I didn't move. I read that balance again. Then I looked at the list of dates. The first withdrawal had happened 4 days after I was admitted for bronchitis complications. I'd been on a nebulizer, barely able to stand, and Brad had been by my side the whole time, smiling, helpful, holding my purse. I drove home and called Lydia. Told her everything. She said, "Start scanning. I want those documents tonight." I laid out the packet on my dining table, opened my printer lid, and fed the first page through. Carver gave me a reference number before I left. DF98223L. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. I took my folder of printed statements and marched into the community legal aid office that same afternoon, where a sharp, soft-spoken attorney named Lydia Tran agreed to help me file a financial exploitation report and start a forensic trace. The waiting room was half full, young mothers with clipboards, an older couple whispering about foreclosure. I sat stiff, folder pressed to my lap like a shield. The receptionist asked why I was there. "Financial abuse," I said, "by a family member." She nodded once and handed me a form. I barely finished filling it out before they called my name. Lydia looked too young to have seen what I'd been through, but she listened like someone who'd heard it all before. She didn't flinch when I told her my son forged my power of attorney. She didn't blink when I said the money was gone. She just asked for details. Dates, names, signatures, any discrepancies. I gave her everything. My statement packet, the sticky note with the bank's reference number, and a flash drive with a PDF scan of every transfer. She leaned back, flipping through pages. The pattern's consistent. It's structured to stay below fraud detection thresholds. That's deliberate. She circled 3 entries. These align with known laundering gaps. We'll subpoena the recipient accounts. If any route offshore, we escalate. I asked what the next step was. She outlined it clearly. First, file a financial exploitation report through the Arizona Department of Economic Security. That opened a formal case. Then we'd start gathering forensic evidence. IP logs, phone records, document metadata. If the power of attorney was filed during a known medical event, that strengthened the case. You said bronchitis. Do you have hospital records from that period? I did. They were in my closet in a canvas box labeled medical. I'd kept everything. Admission slips, prescription lists, even the hospital bracelet. She nodded. Perfect. Bring it tomorrow. And don't contact him. We don't want him sensing what's coming. Before I left, she gave me a case file number, 24FE317. I wrote it beside the bank's code on a fresh sticky note. Different office, different fight, but now I had a name beside mine. And she believed me. That night, while reviewing old mail, I found a torn FedEx receipt tucked in an unpaid utility bill envelope addressed to a P.O. box I'd never used, signed for by B. Larkin, the same alias on one of the offshore wire withdrawals. I had dumped everything from my hallway cabinet onto the floor. Bills, expired coupons, condolence cards, grocery receipts. The house had that dry paper dust smell, quiet except for the steady shuffle of pages. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just knew something was missing. And then, there it was, crumpled in the folds of an old water bill. A FedEx receipt, folded once with a pink highlighter mark across the top. The delivery address was a P.O. box in Mesa. I've never had a P.O. box, never needed one, but the signature, scrawled but legible, read B. Larkin. I sat down hard, holding the slip like it might burn through my skin. It was dated the same week as one of the larger wire transfers from my IRA, $14,500 sent to a numbered account. Lydia had flagged that one. Now I had a name tying it to a physical place. I took a photo of the receipt and texted it to her. Less than a minute later, she replied, "Save the original. Chain of custody matters. We'll use it to connect the alias to physical activity in state." I put it in a plastic sandwich bag and labeled it with the date I found it. That small torn paper shifted everything. Brad hadn't just hidden behind digital tricks and offshore fog. He'd moved with arrogance. He'd physically signed for something using the same alias tied to stolen funds. That's not sloppy. That's cocky. I dug deeper into that stack, found a few red light items. 2 insurance premium letters addressed to, quote, Larkin Trust Holdings, an entity I didn't recognize, both postmarked after my supposed, quote, policy updates. I scanned and flagged them. Lydia wanted all materials scanned into the timeline matrix. The pile of files was growing, but so was the case. I ended the night labeling a new folder, aliases and addresses. I slid the FedEx receipt in first. Proof, real proof, that Brad wasn't just a manipulator. He was operating under a false identity. Using my old laptop, I traced the alias to a defunct LLC tied to a Las Vegas address I'd never visited, and cross-referenced that with my property insurance files, which Brad had insisted he'd streamlined after my fall last year. Turns out, he'd removed me as primary. I hadn't touched that laptop in months. It wheezed when it powered on, but it still opened my bookmarked legal search sites. I typed in Larkin Trust Holdings and hit return. Buried in a digital archive was a Nevada LLC registration, filed 2 years ago, dissolved just 8 months later. Registered agent, B. Larkin. Mailing address, a strip mall suite in Henderson. No phone, no email, just a dead shell company, designed to move money and disappear. I opened the PDF of my homeowner's policy from last year. What I thought was just a routine update. Brad had handled it, saying, "I took care of everything with State Home. got you a lower premium, but the name on the policy now read Trustee Larkin Holdings. I flipped through the pages and found what he'd buried on page 9. My name listed as a secondary, not even owner, just an insured occupant. That change had legal weight. In the event of a claim, the trust would collect. Not me. My breath caught in my throat. I'd lived in this house 32 years. I nursed my husband in that back bedroom through the final months of his cancer, and Brad had quietly erased me from the deed, replaced by a fake trust using a fake name tied to a dead company. I pulled the physical policy from my files. Original versus updated. Marked the differences in red pen. Lydia would need it. She had warned me that insurance fraud was often the paper trail people overlooked, but it could be powerful if we could prove intent and deception. I scanned the pages, named the file Larkin Insurance Modification.pdf, and uploaded it to our shared folder. Then I printed the last correspondence from the insurance company and highlighted the return address. Same strip mall, different suite number, close enough to warrant interest. When I confronted Brad in my kitchen about the wire transfers and insurance changes, he feigned outrage, called me senile, and said Lydia was just trying to fleece you for legal fees, Ma. But his twitching eye and flushed neck betrayed him. He walked in like nothing was wrong, carrying his usual carton of oat milk and 2 croissants, like that bought him access to my fridge. I waited until he set the bag down. "Who's B. Larkin?" I asked. He blinked, then reached for a glass. "What?" I opened the folder and slid the FedEx receipt across the counter. "Sign for a delivery to a P.O. box in Mesa. Same week, $14,000 disappeared from my IRA. His jaw tightened. "That's not me. It's your handwriting." He scoffed. "You need rest, Ma. You're letting that lady lawyer get in your head. She's the one who caught the LLC tied to my house, which you removed me from." That stopped him. He stared at me, then tried a slower tone. "You fell last year. You were out of it for weeks. I had to make decisions. You gave me power of attorney. I signed a paper while sick. That doesn't give you the right to rewrite my life. You don't know how the system works anymore," he said, leaning on the counter like he was the calm one. "It's complicated. I streamline things. For you. Then why are there 2 foreign accounts with my social linked to your alias?" His face went pale. That wasn't something he could brush off. "I don't know what Lydia's feeding you, but it's a scam. You're her paycheck. She's working you." I watched the red rise in his neck, the way his fingers twitched near the edge of the counter like he wanted to snatch the folder. Instead, I closed it. "I filed a claim and a report. From here on out, everything goes through my attorney." He knocked the croissants off the counter on his way out, slammed the door so hard my spice rack shook. But he didn't say a word to deny the account. I called Lydia immediately after. She told me to expect pushback. We just got our first. Lydia and I filed a subpoena for the LLC's bank records and found 2 more linked accounts in Belize and New Jersey, one of which listed my social security number next to Brad's alias, and a forged power of attorney form dated during my hospital stay last fall. She filed the paperwork fast. Within 48 hours of our kitchen confrontation, we submitted a formal subpoena through the Superior Court for the financial records of Larkin Trust Holdings, LLC, along with any linked domestic and international transfers. The clerk stamped it right in front of me. "Return requested in 10 business days," he said, passing Lydia the receipt. Brad wouldn't see it coming. 7 days later, Lydia called me while I was loading the dishwasher. "You might want to sit down." She had the results. The Nevada LLC was a decoy, a pass-through shell. But the subpoena turned up 2 recipient accounts tied to the trust's EIN, one at a Belize bank known for offshore shelters, the other at a small credit union in New Jersey under the name B. Larkin. That part wasn't surprising. What came next was, the New Jersey account had a joint beneficiary field. It listed my name. My full legal name, social security number, and old mailing address from before Brad moved me into simpler tax brackets. But I had never opened an account in that state. The setup date matched the week I was admitted to St. Luke's ER for pneumonia complications, when I was unconscious for nearly 48 hours. Lydia cross-checked the application file tied to that account. The uploaded document? A scanned power of attorney form notarized in Phoenix with a signature that looked close, but not mine. My signature curves wide. This one was tight and upright. Classic trace job, Lydia said. Not confident, but enough to slip past if no one's looking. We now had bank records, a forged legal instrument, and my social security number placed without consent. I emailed the hospital records from that week and printed the subpoena return. Lydia filed both into the official case timeline. We logged the Belize account under Fraud Investigation Code 9A221 and flagged the New Jersey one as identity misuse. The fraud trail was widening, and Brad had crossed into federal territory. A private investigator, Lydia, uncovered Brad's sealed birth certificate. He'd been adopted at age 2, a fact I'd never known because my late husband had forged a birth record before our wedding to make it official, a secret buried in a safety deposit box I never had a key for. Lydia brought him in after the bank records turned up Brad's use of my social. "I want eyes on the paper trail he thinks doesn't exist," she said. The man she hired, Roy Esparza, had the tired confidence of someone who'd spent decades sifting through other people's lies. Within a week, he found the missing thread. Brad's real identity. Roy called me personally. "Did you know Brad was adopted?" The words sat on my chest like a weight. "No," I said. "I gave birth to him." He hesitated. "You might want to sit down." According to sealed court records from Maricopa County Family Court, Bradley Larkin was placed with your late husband George in 1989, 2 years before you and George married. The mother surrendered custody. No mention of you. Roy found a forged hospital birth record dated later that same year, listing me as the mother, slipped into state records under a now-retired registrar's ID number. I didn't know how to breathe. I remember George handing me that certificate when we applied for preschool. "Keep this safe," he'd said. "It's your copy." I'd never questioned it, never looked deeper. My whole motherhood, built on trust and repetition, and now it was paper thin. Roy traced the forgery back to a safety deposit box George kept under his own name. I'd never seen it. Lydia filed for access using my spousal survivorship rights. The bank released a full inventory list 2 days later. Inside were birth records, a marriage license with a different date, and a typed letter from George to a friend. "She'll never know. It's cleaner this way." I sat in my car outside Lydia's office for 15 minutes, holding that letter in my lap. I'd been deceived by the man I buried and the boy I raised. When Lydia and I contacted the probate lawyer who'd handled my husband's estate, we found that the original will named me sole executor, until Brad filed a forged codicil last year, naming himself beneficiary of family assets, including my house. We drove to the probate office together, Lydia in her pressed navy blazer, me with a manila envelope full of what we now knew. The building was colder than it needed to be, fluorescent and tired. We asked for the estate file under George Larkin's name. The clerk, chewing gum and uninterested, pulled it from storage without question. Lydia flipped through the original documents first, dated 2004, George's unmistakable signature at the bottom, naming me executor, full beneficiary, and custodian of all personal and financial assets. Then came the addendum, a codicil dated October 2024, listing Bradley Larkin as, quote, sole successor to designated family property, citing recent decline in health and diminished capacity on my part. My blood ran hot. I hadn't been sick last fall. I'd hosted Thanksgiving. I drove to California and back by myself. "There was no capacity issue," I said. Lydia nodded. "That's what makes it a forgery." We requested a copy of the notary signature. The seal came from a mobile notary service based out of Scottsdale. Licensed, but recently suspended. We contacted the owner. She remembered the appointment. "It was just the son," she said. "Said his mother was in the hospital. I never saw her." That gave us leverage. Fraudulent witnessing invalidated the codicil. Lydia drafted a motion that afternoon to strike the codicil from the estate record. She attached the audio from Brad's poker night, the adoption file, and the notary statement. She marked it urgent and filed under probate case ref number 784EX219A. Later that night, I dug out the original letter George had written me when we first bought the house. "This is yours," he'd scribbled in blue ink. Always, no matter what happens. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. The man who lied to protect an image was gone. The boy who exploited it was about to face the law. And now, my name stood alone again, on the deed and in the record. Alone in my guest bedroom, I clutched the box of old wedding documents and cried, betrayed by the man I raised, deceived by the husband I trusted, but resolved now to reclaim what was mine before it disappeared completely. The box had lived untouched in the bottom of my cedar chest for years. Inside were anniversary cards, our wedding invitation, faded receipts from our first apartment. I found the original deed to the house, the prenup George insisted we didn't need but filed anyway, and a tattered envelope labeled, "Just in case." That one stopped me. I hadn't noticed it before. Inside was a letter written in George's familiar typewriter font. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I did what I thought was right. I read it twice, then again. He'd known what he did. Fabricating a birth record, keeping Brad's adoption sealed, folding the lie into our lives like it was nothing. I wanted a clean start, he wrote. You would have loved him either way. I just made sure the paperwork matched. That wasn't comfort. It was control. I set the letter aside and opened the envelope with our original marriage license. There were two versions. The first, dated July 1991, was signed in front of a courthouse clerk. The second, filed months later, had the name Bradley handwritten in the dependent line. Altered. Slipped in under a delayed filing. I pressed the pages flat and began cataloging. It was past midnight, but I didn't care. I was up-scanning documents and cross-referencing dates with Lydia's case matrix. Every duplicate, every overwritten signature, every inconsistency went in the folder marked pattern of fabrication. That phrase had legal weight. Lydia told me so. I added a new note to our action list. Request certified copy of property deed before codicil filing date. Confirm no transfer attempts. I wasn't going to let any more time pass without tracking every possible move Brad had made. Then I slid George's letter back into its envelope, not out of sentiment but as evidence. Proof that my marriage, like everything else, had a second version hidden behind the first. I might have been crying. But I was filing too, and every page I logged was leverage. We scheduled a formal dispute review at the bank's central office with Brad, the estate attorney, Lydia, and a representative from the Office of the Arizona Attorney General on a Wednesday morning in early March, the one date Brad couldn't control. The review request had to be submitted in writing. Lydia hand-delivered it. "Face-to-face is cleaner," she said, and I watched her slide the envelope across the mahogany reception desk at Desert First Trust like it carried the weight of every stolen dollar. They had 5 business days to confirm, 10 to assemble all related account records. We gave them 12. By then, they'd received the subpoena returns, the POA dispute, and the fraud report tied to the offshore accounts. They couldn't claim ignorance. Brad had gone quiet since our kitchen standoff. No texts, no calls, just one vague email. "We need to talk, without lawyers." I forwarded it straight to Lydia. She flagged it and said, "Do not respond. He's testing how close we're getting." The AG's office assigned a liaison, Ms. Donahue. She called me personally. Calm voice, clipped tone. "We're opening a preliminary investigation into elder financial exploitation. Your case meets the trigger criteria. We'll attend the bank review to observe." That one sentence shifted the balance. Now, we weren't just filing claims. We had the state watching. Lydia chose the date with care. Wednesday, March 6th. Strategic. It gave us exactly 14 days to file for injunctive relief if things went sideways. She also knew Brad worked contract gigs midweek, under the table. Making him miss a payday meant pressure. He confirmed his attendance through a short reply to the bank, copied to no one. I printed that email and added it to the folder. The prep took all weekend. Lydia built a binder, one tab for financial records, one for legal filings, one for supporting evidence. "You'll speak only if asked," she told me, "but your presence matters. Don't let him look at you like he still owns the room." I bought a plain navy pantsuit from a department store downtown. Simple, clean, no jewelry, no color. Let the facts shine louder than grief. This time, Brad wouldn't be steering the narrative. Inside the glass-walled boardroom of Desert First Trust, I watched Brad swagger in with a cheap blazer and a confident smirk, completely unaware I'd brought the original will, audio proof of his drunken confession, and the real power of attorney form from my doctor's file. He entered 10 minutes late, carrying a coffee like he owned the building. His lawyer, a young estate attorney named Greg Voss, trailed behind, clearly unsure of what he'd been dragged into. Lydia stood without flinching as they walked in. "Thank you for joining us," she said, and nodded to the bank's regional compliance officer, seated next to the AG's rep. Brad gave me a glance like I was the one who should feel embarrassed to be there. He opened his mouth to speak, but Lydia cut him off with a controlled tone. "Before we begin, we're submitting documentation that challenges both the legitimacy of the amended estate documents and the authority under which account access was granted." She laid each item out in front of the compliance officer like evidence in court. First, the original 2004 will, bearing George's verified signature, naming me sole executor and heir. Second, the notary's statement confirming she never met me and notarized Brad's submitted codicil under false pretenses. Third, a flash drive containing the audio recording from poker night. The file played aloud, just the 10-second clip where Brad laughed and said, "She's not even my real mom. I've been milking her for years." You could feel the room shift. Even Voss leaned forward, eyes darting to Brad. Last, Lydia presented the official POA form from St. Luke's Medical Center, signed and witnessed by 2 medical staff during my hospitalization the year before, directly contradicting the forged version Brad had filed. "Everything after this point," Lydia said, tapping the stack, "was executed under false authority. That includes the wire transfers, policy changes, and all trust designations." The bank officer didn't say a word at first. Then he turned to Brad. "Did you submit these documents personally?" Brad tried to stall. My mom was ill." "No," I said. "I was recovering. Not absent." And this time, nobody laughed. I handed over the stack of documentation one by one, Lydia narrating each: the forged codicil, the Belize account logs, the power of attorney fraud, and finally the audio file where Brad joked about milking her dry and watched as the room shifted against him. The compliance officer, Mr. Hanover, asked for originals when possible. I had them. Every page had been reprinted on archival paper, signed, sealed, time-stamped. Lydia didn't rush. She gave space between each item, letting silence do what outrage couldn't, make it real. Greg Voss, Brad's lawyer, began shifting in his seat by the second exhibit. By the third, he stopped taking notes. First came the codicil, notarized under false pretense, invalidated by the notary's own statement. Lydia laid the notary's suspension record beside it. "Fraudulently executed and concealed," she said. Voss asked if we were alleging forgery. Lydia said calmly, "We're alleging fabrication of estate documents for the purpose of asset theft. The criminal filing is pending." Then the wire transfer logs, 17 international transactions under the Larkin Trust alias. Account opened through a dissolved LLC, attached to a POA signed during a hospital admission for which I had full documentation. "No capacity," Lydia said. "No legal authorization, no awareness." Brad started tapping his pen. He looked up at me once, just once. I didn't blink. Next, the hospital's POA. Mine? Real? Witnessed. Lydia passed it across the table, the signature page facing up. "This invalidates all subsequent authorizations filed under the forged form." Mr. Hanover adjusted his glasses, nodded once, and pulled out a red folder from his own briefcase. He began reviewing internal compliance timelines. They were behind already. Finally, the audio. Lydia pressed play on a small recorder. Brad's voice clear as sunlight. "She's not even my real mom. I've been milking her dry since bronchitis hit." It echoed through the glass room like a verdict. No one defended him after that. Even Voss went silent. Hanover closed his folder and said, "We'll be suspending account access immediately pending further review." Brad started to speak. Lydia raised one hand. "You can contest it in court," she said, "but your time here is up." The estate attorney's face turned gray when he realized he'd used false documents. The bank manager revoked Brad's access to all linked accounts, and Lydia, calm as ever, handed over a notarized motion for injunction and asset freeze while Brad's smirk crumbled. Voss tried to backpedal. My client believed these were legitimate filings. If there's been confusion, Lydia cut him off. There was no confusion. Your client submitted fabricated documents to claim assets he had no legal right to. She turned to the bank manager. We're asking for an immediate freeze on all associated accounts, and a notification to be sent to the Office of the Attorney General confirming the financial exploitation protocol was triggered. Hanover didn't argue. He slid a form across the table and signed his section. We'll initiate the freeze on the 4 accounts listed here. 3 under the trust alias and 1 tied to Ms. Larkin's social. Access revoked as of now. Brad's face flushed, lips parted like he might shout, but nothing came out. He glanced at me, maybe looking for mercy, maybe just used to being able to charm his way back into the room. I didn't blink. Let him see the damage he thought I'd never fix. Lydia wasn't done. She pulled another document from her briefcase, this one with a gold seal on the cover. Motion for preliminary injunction, she said. Filed with the probate court this morning. Prevents sale, transfer, or reassignment of any assets tied to the disputed estate or its forged extensions. Includes the residence. Voss didn't speak. He stared down at the motion like it might bite him. Brad pushed back from the table so fast his chair screeched. This is insane! You're doing this to your own son? No, I said, standing. I'm doing it to the man who lied, stole, and tried to erase me. He pointed at Lydia. She's using you. You'll end up broke and alone. Lydia stood too, collected her files. She'll end up with what was hers all along. We left as the locks changed, on the accounts, the records, and the narrative. Brad wasn't in control anymore. The AG representative announced a formal investigation into elder exploitation and financial fraud, and Brad's poker buddies, who had laughed that night, were named in the subpoena as accessory witnesses. He stormed out swearing, but no one followed him. We were already in the parking lot when Lydia's phone buzzed with a confirmation email. Office of the Attorney General is opening a full case file, she said, eyes scanning the screen. They're designating your situation high priority under ARS 46 to 456. That meant subpoenas with teeth. That meant asset tracing beyond what we'd already found. By 3 p.m., Brad had been officially named as the primary subject in the AG's case summary. Lydia forwarded me the PDF. I read the opening line 3 times. Alleged financial abuse of vulnerable adult, involving fraudulent documentation, identity misuse, and international laundering channels. There it was, in state language. What I had been screaming into a void for months was now stamped, docketed, and real. The kicker came 20 minutes later. One of the AG's investigators had already flagged the poker night audio for probable cause. Brad's own bragging had put his friends at the table in the crosshairs. Names mentioned during the recording, Tommy, Joel, Mark, were listed as potential accessory witnesses in knowledge of fraud. Lydia didn't smile, but I could see the flicker in her eyes. This just got bigger than estate theft, she said. Brad's lawyer tried to control the spiral. He called Lydia's office to, quote, request private mediation before the investigation widened. She declined. My client is not settling with someone who called her senile and emptied her accounts while she was sick, she told him flatly. The last thing I saw that day was Brad storming down the sidewalk, blazer off, shirt damp under the arms, muttering curses into his phone. He looked around the lot for someone to follow him, Voss, the bank rep, maybe even me. But no one moved. I didn't wave, didn't speak. Just opened the passenger door, sat down, and exhaled. Lydia turned the key and said, next up is title reversion. Then we clear the codicil. For the first time, I believed her. 2 weeks later, the house title was returned to my name, the accounts unfrozen in my favor, and Lydia handed me a small velvet pouch containing my original wedding ring, retrieved from a pawn slip Brad had left behind. Proof that what's mine stays mine. The title reversion came through quietly, with no hearing. Just a letter from the county recorder's office confirming the revocation of the fraudulent trust deed. Lydia stood beside me as I signed the reinstatement form. My hand was steady. Your sole title holder again, the clerk said, stamping the corner in red. No ceremony. Just legal truth, corrected. The bank followed 3 days later. With the injunction upheld and the investigation pending, they restored full access to my accounts. A security flag remained on file. I requested it stay there permanently. And then, the ring. Lydia slid it across her desk without a word. The pouch was soft, deep blue, the kind cheap jewelry stores use. Inside was the band I hadn't seen in over a year. Gold, thin, worn smooth at the edges. I thought I'd misplaced it after my hospital stay. Turns out Brad pawned it in Mesa, the same week he rerouted the insurance mail. I slipped it on, not because I wanted to remember the marriage, but because it was mine. Bought with my salary, my initials engraved inside. He hadn't erased me. Not from the title, not from the bank, not from my life. I stood up straighter walking out of Lydia's office. No papers in my hands, no fear in my chest, only ownership.